My name is Daniel Cross, 64 years old, retired financial consultant. I used to believe I could fix anything with numbers, balance sheets, or logic, but nothing prepares you for the arithmetic of family disappointment. It was a Thursday evening in Boulder, Colorado, the kind of late spring night where the mountains look like shadows folded against the sky. I was sitting in my study, a bourbon sweating quietly beside a pile of old client files I hadn't touched in years. Then came the knock, not the gentle kind you expect from family. It was hard, sharp, demanding. When I opened the door, my daughter stood there, Lila, 31, wearing a designer jacket she couldn't afford. Behind her, her husband Evan leaned against a sleek black car, arms crossed, sunglasses still on though the sun had long gone. "Dad," Lila said, no hug, no warmth, just my name in a tone that sounded like a business call gone wrong. Evan stepped forward and handed me a folded document. "We need your help," he said. "It's urgent." I unfolded it. A formal notice. Loan default. Amount due, $550,000. I looked up at them slowly. "What am I looking at?" "It's what we owe," Lila said quickly. "And we need it cleared. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I repeated. "That's a big ask." Evan shrugged. "It's not an ask. It's family responsibility. You've got it, don't you?" The air tightened between us. When I retired 5 years ago, I thought I'd left behind the arrogance of men like Evan, people who treated money like air, invisible until it ran out. He had all the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. I took a slow sip of bourbon, trying to buy myself a few seconds of calm. "Why do you owe over $500,000? "Investments," Evan said quickly. "Business expansion. Just bad timing." "Crypto," Lila added under her breath, not meeting my eyes. I sighed. "Ah, Dad," she said, stepping closer, her voice softening. "Please, you've always helped. You helped with my college, with the wedding. This is the same, just bigger." I studied her. The last time I saw Lila, she'd been furious. I refused to co-sign on a house she couldn't afford. She hadn't spoken to me for 8 months after that. Now she was here, standing on my porch at dusk, asking for $500,000 by tomorrow. "Lila," I said carefully, "I love you, but what you're asking is not help. It's rescue, and rescues come with lessons people rarely learn from." Evan smirked. "You sound like one of your finance lectures." I looked at him. "That's because I am." Lila's face hardened. "Dad, we don't have time for this. They're threatening to freeze our accounts. We'll lose everything. We need that money now. You have it. So just please write the check." I took a long breath. The silence stretched. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome, counting down to something inevitable. Then I smiled. "Okay." Both of them froze. "Okay," Lila repeated, disbelief flickering in her voice. "Yes," I said simply. "Give me 5 hours." Evan frowned. 5 hours. 5 hours," I repeated. "I'll take care of everything." Lila blinked. Relief flooded her face. "Oh my God! Thank you, Dad. You have no idea how much." But I wasn't listening anymore. I had already turned back toward my study. My mind was moving in equations again, just like the old days. Assets, withdrawals, legal contingencies, timing. Every decision I'd made over the last 20 years suddenly felt like preparation for this one moment. When I looked up again, they were gone. I could still hear their car engine fading into the night. I poured the rest of my bourbon down the sink, packed a small leather bag, and opened the safe behind the bookshelf. Inside was a single folder labeled Exit Plan. I had built it 3 years ago when my doctor first said heart irregularities. I told myself it was just a precaution, a way to keep my affairs in order. But now, it felt like destiny waiting for a signature. By midnight, I had wired money into a trust, finalized 2 automated messages, and left a handwritten note inside a small wooden box. Then I placed the box on the coffee table in the living room, where they would be sure to find it. At 1:30 a.m., I was in the back seat of a cab heading toward Denver International Airport. The driver asked where I was going. Someplace quiet, I said. He chuckled. That narrows it down. Texas first. I told him, then I'll figure out the rest. When the plane took off just before dawn, I looked down at the city lights shrinking beneath the clouds. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, the kind that comes not from forgiveness, but from closure. Back in Boulder, the morning sun spilled through my living room windows, lighting up the wooden box I had left behind. By noon, Lila and Evan arrived to collect their money, and when they opened it, everything they thought they knew about me, about themselves, would start to unravel. The flight to Texas was quiet. I sat by the window, watching the clouds drift like slow-moving ships beneath me. My phone buzzed 3 times before I turned it off completely. I didn't need to see who was calling. I already knew. I wasn't running away. Not exactly. It felt more like I was stepping out of a burning house before it collapsed. People mistake distance for abandonment, but sometimes it's mercy. By the time the plane landed, I had made peace with my decision. I rented a car and drove south toward Santa Fe, New Mexico, where an old colleague owned a ranch. My plan was simple. Disappear quietly, tie up loose ends from afar, and let time do the explaining. Meanwhile, back in Boulder, my daughter and her husband were walking into the first storm they couldn't buy their way out of. Lila told me once that silence was my favorite weapon. She wasn't wrong. I had learned over years of corporate boardrooms and family drama that silence forces people to hear themselves. So when they arrived at my house that next morning, the silence would have been deafening. I could imagine the scene clearly. Evan would pound on the door first, impatient, irritated. Lila would try to stay composed, glancing around like a nervous bird. Eventually, they would notice the note taped to the door. Come in. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was spotless, every detail deliberate. The curtains were open. The coffee table sat in the middle of the living room, sunlight spilling across the box I had left there. Polished wood, dark walnut with a brass latch. The kind of box that looks like it should hold something precious. Evan would have opened it first. He was always the one to rush. Lila would have hesitated, whispering his name like a warning. But curiosity and greed are louder than reason. Inside, there was no money, no check, no bank information, just 3 items, a folded letter, a flash drive, and a single key. The letter was addressed to both of them. Lila and Evan, I once believed money could save people. That was my mistake. I gave you both everything except discipline, and that absence became your inheritance. You asked me for $500,000. I'm giving you something better, the truth. You'll find the rest on the flash drive. As for the key, you'll know what it's for soon enough. With all my love, Dad. I could see Lila's face as she read it, the confusion blending into frustration, then fear. Evan would snatch the flash drive, eager to prove me wrong, to find some hidden password-protected bank file. Instead, he would plug it into his laptop and see exactly what I wanted him to see. The flash drive contained documents, neatly organized folders, each labeled with dates and names. His company's name was there too. Contracts, bank transfers, proof of debt, a full breakdown of how every dollar he'd borrowed had been used and misused. But that wasn't the part that would make them scream. There was also a video file. It was only 5 minutes long. In the video, I sat in my study, calm, looking straight into the camera. Evan, I said, I know about the forged documents, the false investors, the shell accounts. You didn't owe $550,000 to a lender. You owed it to yourself because you took that money out of your own company to fund a life you couldn't afford. And Lila, you knew. You signed the documents, too. I paused in the video. I remember that moment well. It was the first time I had spoken those words aloud. I am not here to punish you, I continued, but I will not be part of your collapse. You both built your lives on other people's money, including mine. So, I've made sure that ends today. The authorities already have everything they need. But don't panic. I didn't press charges. I simply told the truth. I leaned closer to the camera in that video, my voice steady. You can rebuild. You can start over. But only if you stop lying. The key in the box will open the storage unit downtown. Inside is what's left of your real inheritance. Not cash, but something you might finally learn from. You'll have to decide whether to open it. Then the screen went black. By the time that video ended, I imagined Lila was already crying. Not because of what I'd done, but because of what she had done to herself. Evan, on the other hand, would be furious. He'd shout, pace, blame everyone but himself. He always did. I knew that sound, the sharp edge of pride cracking under the weight of truth. But I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. On the highway to Santa Fe, the radio played a soft country song about leaving home behind. The lyrics hit harder than I wanted to admit. I pulled over near an overlook, stepping out into the crisp air. From up there, the land stretched forever, gold and red under sun. For the first time in years, I breathed without pressure in my chest. I thought about Lila as a little girl, how she used to sit on my lap and count the coins from my pocket, pretending she was my accountant. Somewhere between those innocent days and this morning's chaos, she had learned that love could be bought. Maybe I thought this was the only way to teach her it couldn't. That night, I checked into a small motel. Simple room, clean sheets. I sat by the window, watching headlights streak across the distant highway. My phone lay face down on the table, still turned off. But even then, I could feel the weight of what was happening back in Boulder. The yelling, the confusion, the realization. Somewhere in that house, my daughter was sitting on the floor, holding that letter in her shaking hands. And for the first time in her adult life, she was facing a truth she couldn't talk her way out of. And me? I wasn't escaping. I was beginning again. By sunrise, I was awake before the alarm. Old habits die hard. Years of early flights, client meetings, and investment briefings had trained my body to beat the clock. I poured a cup of motel coffee and sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about Boulder. I pictured my daughter, Lila, standing in the middle of that living room, the box open, the letter trembling in her hands. Evan pacing, angry, restless, trying to piece together what had just happened. They would not have slept. I knew that much. People who live by manipulation cannot rest when the game stops working. By now, they would have found the clue I left them. The key, the small silver one attached to a tag that read simply, Unit 307. It was for a storage facility on the outskirts of town, a place where I used to keep old work documents, photographs, and a few personal things I could never throw away. Over the years, that small space had become a kind of time capsule. I had packed it with intention, knowing that one day someone might open it and learn who I truly was. I imagined them driving there that morning, Lila behind the wheel, Evan checking his phone every few minutes, desperate for control. The kind of man who believes that as long as he has service, he still has power. When they arrived, the manager, a friendly man named Carl, would have led them through the gates. I had left instructions with him months ago, just in case. Inside the unit, everything was arranged neatly. On one side, old financial records and framed photographs. On the other, a single metal box with a label, Lila. The box was heavy, locked, but the same key from the living room fit perfectly. Inside, they would find several stacks of documents, a thick binder, and an envelope taped to the lid. The envelope contained a short note written in my hand. Lila, when you were 12, you told me you wanted to be like me one day. You said you liked how calm I was when everyone else panicked. I want you to remember that version of yourself. She still exists beneath everything you have become. Inside this binder are records of the trust one built in your name years ago. You could have had everything without asking, but I never told you about it because I wanted you to learn what effort meant. Now you have the chance to earn it. The trust becomes yours in 3 years, but only if you can prove that you've changed. The conditions are simple. No debts, no fraud, no lies. Build something honest, even if it's small. Love, Dad. I knew she would cry when she read it, not out of anger, but from something deeper, grief mixed with guilt. Evan would have stayed silent for a while, staring at the papers. Eventually, he would realize that there was no money to take, no loophole to exploit, just accountability written on every page. He would probably leave first. Men like him do not linger where they cannot manipulate. And Lila would stay behind, surrounded by pieces of my life she had never cared to ask about before. Photographs of her mother and me in our early years. Her school drawings. The faded baseball glove from when I used to coach her team. All the things she had forgotten, packed away and waiting to remind her who she used to be. Back in Santa Fe, I walked through a small local market later that morning. The air smelled of roasted coffee and dry earth. I bought a loaf of bread, some fruit, and sat outside on a bench watching people move through their quiet routines. It struck me how peaceful life can be when you stop chasing control. I had spent decades managing other people's money, guiding them away from the same mistakes I was now watching my daughter make. Maybe that was the irony of it all. We can teach the world discipline, but we cannot force on the ones we love. I stayed in Santa Fe for several days. Each morning, I checked the news, half expecting to see Evan's name in some financial scandal. But nothing came, just silence. On the 5th day, I finally turned my phone back on. There were 16 missed calls and 3 voicemails, all from Lila. I didn't listen right away. I made another cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunlight stretch across the motel parking lot. When I finally pressed play, her voice cracked through the speaker. "Dad, I saw everything. I read it all. You were right about Evan. About me. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I really am. Please call me." The second message came a few hours later. "Evan left. He took what little we had and disappeared. I'm selling the house. I think I need to start over. I know you don't talk, but I hope someday you will." The third message was short. "I found the photo of Mom and me at the lake. Thank you for keeping it." I listened to those messages twice, then turned the phone off again, not because I was angry, but because I wanted to give her space to live through what she had just learned. Growth takes silence. That night, I sat on a motel balcony as the sky turned violet over the desert. The wind carried a soft hum, and for a moment, I could almost hear her laughter from years ago. The child who believed that counting coins with her father was the most magical thing in the world. Somewhere in Boulder, she was beginning to understand what real wealth meant. Not money, not status, but clarity. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I had done something right. The days passed slower in Santa Fe. Time had a different rhythm there, stretched between the warm winds and the sound of distant traffic. Every morning, I walked to the same cafe near the plaza, ordered black coffee, and sat outside where I could see the mountains fade into the horizon. For the first time in decades, I had no meetings, no deadlines, no obligations to anyone, just silence. But silence, as peaceful as it sounds, has a way of forcing old memories to speak. It was late afternoon when I finally decided to listen to my daughter's messages again. Each one carried a different kind of pain. The first was confusion, the second regret, the third something closer to acceptance. But it was a fourth message that stopped me cold. "Dad, I found another letter. It wasn't in the box. It was hidden behind the photo frame in the storage unit. It's addressed to someone named Clara. I think it's about Mom. Please call me. I need to understand." I froze. Clara. That name had not been spoken in years. Clara had been my wife, Lila's mother. She passed away when Lila was 17, a quiet illness that took her before either of us was ready. But there was something Lila never knew about her mother, something I had buried long ago, both literally and emotionally. I stood up from the motel chair and looked out the window. The desert sun was sinking low, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. My hands trembled slightly. I knew exactly which letter she was talking about. That letter had not been meant for Lila. It had been meant for me. I had written it the night before Clara's funeral. It was my way of talking to her one last time, telling her the things I never could when she was alive. I kept it locked away in that storage unit for years, behind the photograph of the three of us at the lake. I had forgotten about it completely, and now my daughter had found it. I sat back down, my mind circling through memories I thought I had outlived. Clara's laughter, the smell of her hair after the rain, the way she used to hum when she cooked, the last time she smiled, too weak to speak, but still trying to tell me that everything would be fine. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I dialed Lila's number. She answered on the first ring. Dad. Her voice was soft, almost scared. I'm here, I said. There was silence, then a long exhale. I didn't mean to open it. I thought it was part of everything else. I'm sorry. It's all right, I told her. You had every right to read it. She hesitated. It wasn't just a letter, Dad. It was a confession. I closed my eyes. I know. It said you were thinking of leaving us back then, she continued. Before Mom got sick. Is that true? The question hung heavy in the air. Yes, I said quietly. It was true. I could hear her breathing, uneven and fragile. I was tired, I continued. Your mother and I were fighting constantly about money, about work, about how much time I spent at the office. I had built a life that looked perfect on the outside, but felt hollow inside. I thought leaving would fix it. Then she got sick, and everything changed. Lila didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. So you stayed out of guilt? No, I said. I stayed because I realized I didn't need a different life. I needed to be a different man. I just learned it too late. The line went quiet again. I could hear the faint hum of her breathing. Dad, she said finally, I think I understand now. All those years, I blamed you for being distant. But maybe you were just afraid. I admitted, afraid of losing everything. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of watching you repeat my mistakes. She sighed softly. I already did. That's why we're talking now, I said, so you don't have to anymore. For the first time in years, there was no anger in her voice, just something softer, heavier. Forgiveness, maybe, or the beginning of it. She told me about her plans. She had sold a house, paid off what little debt she could, and moved into a small apartment in Denver. She was working part-time at a local nonprofit, helping families learn basic budgeting. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. That's good, I said. It suits you. I guess it's my turn to fix numbers, she said with a faint laugh. When we hung up, the sky had turned a deep shade of red. I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the hum of the motel air conditioner. The weight I had been carrying for years began to lift little by little. That night, I took out a notebook and began to write a new letter. This one wasn't for Clara or for myself. It was for Lila. I told her about the years before she was born, about the struggles, the fear, and the small victories. I told her about how much her mother had loved her, and how proud she would have been to see her finding her own strength. Most of all, I told her something I should have said a long time ago, that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just gives you a place to stand when you face it. When I finished writing, I folded the pages neatly and sealed them in an envelope. I didn't know when I'd give it to her, but for the first time, I wanted to. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain across the desert. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled. It felt like the world was finally shifting. And I realized that maybe the letter Lila found wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the start of our second chance. It had been 2 weeks since I last spoke with Lila. The air in Santa Fe had turned cooler, the skies darker. I'd grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of my days. Coffee in the morning, long walks to the market, and evenings spent reading under the desert sunset. Life, for once, felt still. But peace never lasts long when your past still has unpaid debts. It was late afternoon when the knock came, firm, rhythmic, too confident to belong to a stranger. I set my book down and opened the door. A man stood there, early 40s, sharp eyes, wearing a suit that didn't fit the casual tone of the city. His tie was loosened, his hair slicked back. There was a kind of restless energy in his movements. Mr. Harlan? He asked. That depends on who's asking. I said. He smiled slightly. Name's Rick Tanner. I used to work with Evan Myers. The sound of that name froze the air between us. What do you want? I asked. He held up a small envelope. This belongs to you. Or at least it used to. I hesitated before taking it. The paper was worn, smudged, and sealed with tape. No address, no return name. Evan gave this to me about a month ago. Tanner continued. Told me if anything ever happened to him, I should find you. I stare at the envelope. And why would he think you'd ever find me? Because he said you'd run. Tanner said simply, and he was right. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the chair near the window. You'd better come in. He sat down, glancing around the room with quick eyes. Nice place. Quiet. Doesn't really suit a guy like you, though. Former executive, wasn't it? Financial consultant. I corrected. And you didn't drive all the way here to talk about decor. What's this about? He leaned back. Evan owed me money. A lot of it. He wasn't just in trouble with the bank. He was in trouble with people who don't like to wait. When he disappeared, I started looking. Trace his calls, his emails. That's how I found out about you. I folded my arms. You think I'm hiding him? Tanner shook his head. No, I think you're smarter than that. But I do think you know something. I looked down at the envelope again. You said if anything happened to him. What exactly did you mean? He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. Last week, someone found a car abandoned near Flagstaff. Evan's wallet was inside. No sign of him. A gust of wind rattled the window. I turned the envelope over, peeled the tape slowly, and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was rushed, uneven. Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't fix it. I thought I could outsmart them, but I was wrong. I know you never liked me, and you were right not to. But before you close this letter, know that Lila didn't know everything. I made her believe the debt was mine alone. It wasn't. They'll come for her next. Don't let them. There was no signature, just a faint smear of ink at the bottom. I folded the letter back and looked at Tanner. You already knew this, didn't you? He gave a half smile. I had a feeling. Evan was careless, but he wasn't stupid. He used your daughter's name to open some of his shell accounts. The people he borrowed from. They don't care whose name's on the paper. They just want their money. My chest tightened. How much? $550,000, Tanner said. Give or take. The same number. The same debt. The one that started it all. I stood up, pacing slowly toward the window. Outside, the wind was picking up, bending the trees in the parking lot. The smell of rain carried to the cracked glass. Why come to me? I asked. You could have gone after her directly. Tanner tilted his head. Because I'm not like them. I just want what's mine. You've got experience. Connections. Maybe you can fix this before it gets ugly. I turned back toward him. And if I refuse? He gave a slow shrug. Then someone else won't. And trust me, they don't talk as nicely as I do. We stood in silence for a long moment. The storm outside broke with a deep, rolling thunder. Where are they now? I asked. Denver, he said. Same city your daughter's in. Small world, huh? I grabbed my jacket. Let's go. Tanner blinked. Now, I said firmly, if what you're saying is true, we don't have time to wait. As we stepped outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, cold and heavy against the warm desert air. The clouds had swallowed the sun, leaving only gray light behind. I hadn't planned to see Lila again so soon. I had hoped to give her time to rebuild, to heal, but the past has a way of testing you right when you think you're free. As Tanner started the car, I glanced back at the motel one last time. The small balcony, the quiet mornings, the peace I'd found, all of it slipping into memory. I realized then that the storm wasn't just outside. It was coming for all of us. And this time there would be no running. The drive to Denver took close to 6 hours. Tanner barely spoke for most of it. The hum of the highway filled the silence between us, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the windshield. I spent most of the trip thinking about Lila, what she might be doing, if she was safe, if she had any idea that danger was circling closer with every mile we covered. By the time we reached the city, the rain had turned into a steady drizzle. The skyline glowed faintly through the mist, glass towers reflecting the muted gray of the evening sky. Tanner pulled into a small diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, Chipped paint on the walls, cracked leather booths, and a waitress who looked like she'd been there since the doors opened decades ago. We slid into a corner booth. He ordered coffee. I asked for water. So, I said finally, breaking the silence, "Tell me everything you know." Tanner stirred his coffee with the handle of his spoon. After Evan disappeared, a guy named Russo started asking questions. Used to be in private finance. Now he runs operations for a group that launders money through construction deals. Evan owed him over 300 grand. And the rest? I asked. Split between two smaller players, Tanner said. But Russo's the one we need to worry about. He doesn't threaten, he acts. I nodded slowly. And you think he knows where Lila is? Tanner leaned back. If he doesn't yet, he will soon. Evan used her name on one of the accounts tied to a property deal. Once they connect the dots, she'll be on their radar. I looked out the window. The street outside was empty except for a man standing under a flickering streetlight, smoking. The rain streaked across the glass like veins. We need to find her first, I said. Tanner pulled out his phone, swiping through his messages. She works at a nonprofit downtown, right? I can track the address. She doesn't know about any of this, I said quietly. Not yet. She thinks Evan's gone for good. He gave a short laugh. People like him never really disappear. They just change who pays for their mistakes. I didn't respond. He wasn't wrong. Within 10 minutes, we had the address. A small community financial center near Colfax Avenue. I paid the bill, left a few extra dollars on the table, and followed Tanner back into the rain. Denver smelled of wet concrete and distant exhaust. The streets glistened under the pale light of street lamps. I hadn't been there in years, not since a conference long before retirement. Back then, I had stood in glass towers, giving lectures about fiscal discipline and personal accountability, lessons I had failed to teach my own daughter. When we arrived, the building was dark except for one light in an upper window. Tanner parked the car and shut off the engine. She's still here, I said. He glanced at me. You sure? I know her habits, I said. She always stays late. We stepped out and walked quietly to the entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see her sitting at a desk, typing. Her hair was tied back, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But there was focus in her movements, the kind I hadn't seen in years. I hesitated before knocking. Tanner gave me a look. You ready? He asked. No, I said, but that's never stopped me before. I pushed open the door. The chime echoed softly. Lila looked up, startled at first, then relief washed over her face. Dad. Hey, I said, trying to smile. You're working late. I could say the same, she said. Standing up? What are you doing here? Before I could answer, Tanner stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed. Who's this? Someone who came to warn us. I said, we don't have much time. She frowned. Warn us about what? Evan's debt, I said. It wasn't just his. He used your name in his accounts. People are coming, Lila. Dangerous people. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. That's not possible. I had nothing to do with any of that. I know, I said gently, but they won't care. She looked between Tanner and me, her voice rising. So, what do you expect me to do? Run? Hide? You left Dad. You walked away. And now you're here telling me. I reached out and took her hand. I'm telling you that you're not alone this time. She went still. For a moment, the tension in her shoulders eased. Then the sound of tires screeching outside snapped us back to reality. Tanner turned toward the window. They're here. 2 black SUVs had pulled up across the street. The doors opened, and men in dark coats stepped out. Back door, Tanner said quickly. Now. We rushed through the hallway and out into the alley behind the building. The rain had turned heavy, pooling in the cracks of the pavement. Headlights cut through the mist as voices shouted in the distance. Lila grabbed my arm. Dad, who are these people? The kind you don't negotiate with, Tanner said. Keep moving. We reached the end of the alley, where Tanner's car waited. Just as he started the engine, one of the men appeared from the corner, shouting. A gun glinted in his hand. Tanner floored the gas. The tires screamed as we sped out into the street, water splashing across the windshield. Lila sat in the back, shaking. What's happening? Exactly what I was afraid of, I said, the past catching up. We drove for several miles before Tanner finally slowed down, turning into an underground parking lot beneath an old hotel. He cut the engine and turned to me. They're going to keep looking, he said. You got anywhere safe to go? I thought for a moment. Yeah, one place. Lila looked at me, fear and hope tangled in her eyes. Where? I met her gaze. Your mother's cabin. The one near Estes Park. No one knows about it. Tanner nodded. Then that's where we go. As we sat there in the silence of the parking lot, rain dripping from the ceiling above us, I realized something. This wasn't about debts anymore. It was about redemption. Hers, mine, and maybe even Evan's. And redemption always comes with a storm. We left Denver before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, wrapped in mist and silence. Tanner drove while I watched the skyline fade behind us. Lila sat in the back seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes distant. None of us said much. Some moments don't need words. As the miles stretched on, the buildings thinned, replaced by wide stretches of forest and open highway. The air grew colder, the sky darker with low clouds pressing against the mountain peaks. The cabin sat just outside Estes Park, tucked deep into a grove of pines. Clara and I had bought it long before Lila was born. It had been our escape from the noise of business trips and boardrooms, a quiet place where the world slowed down. After Clara died, I couldn't bring myself to come back. Until now, when we finally reached the narrow dirt road leading to the cabin, the air felt heavy, almost too still. I stepped out of the car, breathing in the scent of pine and damp earth. For a moment, memories hit me in waves. Clara laughing on the porch, Lila chasing fireflies in the dark, the sound of the creek running behind the trees. It's beautiful, Tanner said quietly, stepping beside me. It was home once, I said. Lila walked toward the porch, her shoes crunching on the gravel. I remember this place, she said softly. Mom used to read to me by the window. I nodded. She loved it here, said the mountains made her feel safe. We carried a few supplies inside. The air smelled of dust and cedar, untouched for years. Sunlight spilled to the window, catching dust motes that floated like slow snowflakes. Tanner checked the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. We'll need to stay off the grid for a while, he said. No phone calls, no cards, nothing traceable. I know, I said. We'll make do. He glanced at Lila. How much cash do you have? About $300, she said. I reached into my jacket and handed her an envelope. That should cover us for a bit. She frowned as she took it. Dad, where did you get this? Old emergency stash, I said. One of the few lessons I learned early in finance. Always keep something for when everything else collapses. She smiled faintly, but there was worry behind it. By late afternoon, the storm clouds began to gather over the mountains. The wind carried the scent of rain and pine needles. Tanner sat by the window, scanning the road below with quiet focus. I started a fire in the old stone fireplace. Lila stood near the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of old novels Clara used to read. You never told me you kept all this, she said. I didn't think it mattered anymore. I said, It does now, she whispered. The fire crackled softly. The storm outside began to growl. Around dusk, Tanner's phone buzzed once. He glanced at the screen, then at me. They're moving, he said. Russo's men. They've been seen heading north. My stomach tightened. How far? Maybe 2 hours, he said. Lila looked between us. They found us already? Not yet, Tanner said. But they're looking in the right direction. I walked to the window, staring out at the winding road below. The rain had started falling hard, drumming against the roof. The forest looked darker now, the tree lines shifting in the wind. Then we make this place ready, I said. Tanner gave a short nod. I'll check the perimeter. Make sure there's only one way in. While he went outside, I sat by the fire with Lila. She stared into the flames, her face lit in amber light. Dad, she said quietly, if they find us, what happens then? I looked at her, seeing Clara's eyes in hers. The same strength, the same fear she tried to hide. Then we deal with it, I said, like we should have years ago. She nodded slowly. I never asked before, but did Mom know about your business deals? About everything you were involved in? I sighed. She knew enough to worry, but I always told her I had it under control. That's what men like me always say, until we don't. There was a long silence. Then Lila said softly, "You're trying to fix everything now, aren't you?" I met her eyes. "I'm trying to make sure you don't carry my mistakes any longer." She reached out and took my hand. For a moment, the storm outside felt distant. Tanner came back in, soaked from the rain. "We've got maybe an hour before they hit the ridge road," he said. "If they're tracking by car, we'll see their lights." "Then we wait," I said. The three of us sat in the dim cabin, listening to the wind and rain. Every creak of which sounded louder, every gust sharper. Time seemed to slow. Then, just after dark, Tanner whispered, "There." Through the window, two faint lights appeared in the distance, headlights weaving through the trees. "They found us," he said. I stood up, heart pounding, and moved toward the back door. "We can't let them corner us here." "There's a trail behind the cabin," I said. "It leads down to the creek. If we follow it west, it'll take us to the old ranger station." Tanner grabbed his jacket. "You sure about the trail?" "I used to hike it with Clara," I said. "It's narrow, but it's safe." Lila hesitated. "Dad, what if they see us?" "They won't," I said. "The rain's on our side." We slipped out into the storm. The rain hit hard against our faces, the wind cutting cold through our clothes. The forest loomed dark around us, the path barely visible beneath the mud. Behind us, I could see the faint glow of headlights nearing the cabin. "Go," I whispered. We moved quickly, branches scraping our arms, mud clinging to our shoes. The sound of thunder rolled through the valley. Every flash of lightning lit up the trees in stark, ghostly white. After what felt like hours, we reached the creek. The water was high from the rain, rushing fast and cold. We climbed across a fallen log, one by one. Tanner went first, then Lila. When I followed, the wood shifted under my weight, slick with moss. Halfway across, I heard shouting in the distance. Voices. "They're close," Tanner called. "Keep moving." The log creaked, and I nearly slipped, catching myself on a branch. My heart hammered in my chest. Then Lila turned, her hand reaching for mine. "Come on, Dad." Her grip was steady, strong, the same way Clara's used to be when she helped me climb this very creek years ago. We made it across just as flashlights appeared behind the trees on the far bank. "Run," Tanner said. We ran, through the rain, through the mud, through the ghosts of every mistake that had led us here. And somewhere behind us, the cabin, my past, went up in flames. The fire glowed faintly through the trees, carried by the wind and swallowed by the storm. I didn't look back. The fire behind us lit the horizon in shades of orange and red, fighting against the darkness of the storm. The cabin was gone, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was ahead of us, the ranger station, and whatever truth was waiting there. We moved fast through the forest, following the narrow trail that twisted along the creek. The rain had softened, turning into a cold mist that clung to our clothes. My body ached with every step, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Tanner led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Lila stayed close behind me, silent but steady. Every few minutes, I turned to check the trees. The lights behind us had faded, but I knew they were still out there, moving carefully, following our tracks. Finally, through the fog, a shape appeared, the old ranger station. The roof sagged from years of weather, the wood gray and cracked, but it was still standing. We reached the porch and Tanner forced the door open. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old rain. A few broken chairs lay scattered across the floor, and a rusted stove sat in the corner. Lila dropped into one of the chairs, breathing hard. "Are we safe?" "For now," Tanner said, locking the door behind us. But they'll keep searching until daylight. I walked to the window, peering out into the rain. The forest was dark and quiet again. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe we might have outrun them. Then I saw it, the faint glint of light moving between the trees. "They're here," I said quietly. Tanner joined me at the window. "Two, maybe three of them," he muttered. "They're spreading out." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small revolver. Lila's eyes widened. "You brought a gun?" He didn't answer, just checked the cylinder. Old habits. I took a slow breath. No one gets hurt unless they make the first move. We're not becoming like them. Tanner nodded reluctantly. The next few minutes stretched like hours. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the sound of footsteps on wet leaves grew louder. Then came a voice from outside, sharp and cold. "Daniel Harlan." I froze. It wasn't Russo. It was someone younger. A man stepped into the clearing, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. His coat was soaked, his expression unreadable. "Come out," he shouted. "You've got something that belongs to my employer." Tanner whispered, "Stay low." I looked at Lila, who sat trembling but silent. Then I turned back toward the door. "Let me handle this," I said quietly. "Dad, no," she whispered. I gave her a small smile. "It's time I stopped running." I stepped outside into the cold. The rain felt sharp on my face. The man's flashlight caught me in its beam. "I'm Daniel," I said, "and whatever you think I have, I don't." He tilted his head. "That's not what I've been told." Behind him, two more figures appeared, their silhouettes dark against the fading firelight from the burning cabin. "You've been chasing the wrong person," I said. "Evan Myers is the one who owes you. He's the one who lied." The man smirked. "Evan Myers is dead." For a moment, everything stopped. The rain, the wind, even my heartbeat. "What did you say?" I asked. He shrugged. "Body turned up in Flagstaff 3 days ago. Looks like he crossed the wrong people. But before he died, he said you had access to something. Offshore accounts. Numbers he couldn't get to." It clicked then. Evan's letters warning his guilt. He hadn't been running from Russo. He'd been trying to protect Lila. "You think I have his accounts," I said slowly. "I don't think," the man said. "I know. You were his backup. You're going to give me the access codes." I looked past him at the trees, at Tanner hiding in the shadows near the corner of the building. Gun raised just enough to be seen. "Even if I did," I said, "I wouldn't hand him over to a criminal." The man's eyes hardened. "Then your daughter pays for it." Before I could respond, Tanner's voice cut through the rain. "Put the gun down." The man spun, raising his weapon. The flash came quick and bright, one gunshot echoing through the valley. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. When the smoke cleared, the man lay on the ground, his gun kicked from his hand. Tanner stood breathing hard, his arm trembling. The other two hesitated, then ran into the trees, vanishing into the dark. Lila ran out from the cabin, her face pale. "Dad, are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "It's over." Tanner lowered his weapon. "They'll be gone before dawn. They're not paid enough to die for this." I looked down at the man on the ground. His pulse was weak, but steady. "We call the authorities," I said. "We end it properly." Tanner nodded. By morning, the storm had passed. The air was cold, clean, and still. The sheriff's trucks arrived just after sunrise. I told them everything about Evan, the debt, the threats, the fire. They took the man into custody, and we gave our statements. When it was all done, Lila and I stood on the porch of the ranger station, watching the sun rise over the mountains. "You think they'll leave us alone now?" she asked. "I think they have bigger problems," I said. "And I think Evan finally paid his last debt." She was quiet for a while, then said softly, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not giving up on me, even when I made it easy to." I smiled. "You're my daughter. I never stopped believing in you. I just needed you to start believing in yourself." She leaned her head against my shoulder. The sky above the mountains was streaked with gold. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Tanner joined us a few minutes later, his jacket slung over his shoulder. "They'll keep Evan's account sealed for investigation," he said. "You're clear." "Good," I said. "Then it's time to start over." He gave a faint smile. "Where will you go?" I looked out toward the horizon. Maybe back to Santa Fe. Or maybe somewhere new. A place where money doesn't define every decision. Lila looked up at me. "Mind if I come along?" I met her eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that." The three of us stood there for a long while, watching the morning light spread across the valley. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, not as fear, but as clarity. Evan was gone. The debts were settled. And for the first time since Clara's death, I felt like my life belonged to me again. I turned to Lila and smiled. "Let's go home." Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.